At 7:15 a.m. this morning, Buckingham Palace broke its silence. In a joint press statement released simultaneously from Clarence House and Windsor Castle, Princess Anne and Lady Louise Windsor, speaking on behalf of the royal family's Legal Advisory Council, issued their most direct rebuttal yet to Prince Harry's latest claims. Recent allegations suggesting that the royal household obstructed legal actions or colluded with media organizations are entirely false and unsupported by any credible evidence. The timing was no accident. Prince Harry had just left the High Court in London after suffering a major procedural defeat in his case against News Group Newspapers, publisher of The Sun, over alleged phone hacking in the early 2000s. The judge dismissed large portions of his lawsuit on legal grounds, ruling that the claims were barred by England's 6-year statute of limitations. In briefings to sympathetic media outlets and in private conversations later leaked to reporters, Harry once again cast himself as a victim not only of the press, but of the monarchy itself. He alleged that palace officials had prevented him from bringing legal action earlier through a series of informal royal protection agreements, with newspapers' arrangements that were said to include limiting litigation in exchange for safeguarding the monarchy's public image, preferential access to royal events and interviews, financial settlements delayed and negotiated behind closed doors, and subtle pressure placed on family members to remain silent. He further asserted that similar constraints had once applied to Sarah, Duchess of York, and Prince Andrew. The palace asked us to wait, one aide sympathetic to Harry reportedly paraphrased, to protect the institution, to let things be handled quietly later. Harry has not denied that money now plays a central role in his persistence. Court filings and financial disclosures submitted during preliminary hearings revealed mounting pressures. Legal costs from multiple lawsuits across Britain and the United States, declining commercial revenue, and the conclusion earlier this month of the financial provisions tied to his divorce settlement, an agreement that had previously provided structured income from shared ventures and intellectual property projects. Senior legal analysts estimate that the News Group defeat alone could leave Harry responsible for £3.6 million in combined costs under the UK's loser pays principle, on top of nearly £400,000 already assessed in earlier procedural rulings. Against that backdrop, Harry's attempt to link his courtroom collapse to palace interference was explosive. The court, however, was unmoved. Mr. Justice Fancourt ruled that Harry had produced no documentary proof of any such secret agreement, no correspondence, no memoranda, no contracts, no third-party testimony. His judgment described the argument as vague, inconsistent, and unsupported by contemporaneous evidence. That language, unsupported by evidence, now sits at the centre of today's royal response. Lady Louise, herself trained in law and acting as counsel within the royal household's advisory team, joined Princess Anne in the palace briefing room shortly after dawn. Standing beneath the Queen Victoria portrait at Clarence House, Anne did not soften her tone. "This is not a family quarrel," she said. "It is a legal matter, governed by proof. And proof has not been provided. I cans, I disses." Louise followed with a precise dismantling of Harry's claims, beginning with the assertion that Sarah Ferguson and Prince Andrew had been silenced by palace diktat. "That narrative is demonstrably untrue," she said. The Duchess of York published memoirs, gave televised interviews, and conducted press tours following her divorce. She was not restrained by the royal household from speaking. End quote. Louise cited Ferguson's post-divorce book projects and appearances on British breakfast television, as well as interviews given to Hello and The Sunday Mirror, none of which, she emphasised, required palace clearance. "The existence of criticism does not equate to suppression," Louise added. Behind the scenes, palace investigators have reportedly compiled a counter-dossier tracking Harry and Meghan's own contractual relationships with media companies. Among the material referenced in today's briefing, the Sussex's long-running exclusivity arrangements with streaming platforms, renewed several times since the early 2020s, and public remarks by Meghan herself, explaining restrictions on photography at celebrity events as being tied to commercial obligations rather than royal protocol. Princess Anne was blunter. One cannot allege coercion while simultaneously negotiating exclusive global media contracts, she said. What emerged from the palace this morning was not sympathy but fatigue. Anne acknowledged that the royal family had often chosen silence in recent years, out of restraint, out of familial regard, out of an understanding that national duty sometimes outweighs personal grievance. She paused before adding, "That restraint has repeatedly been mistaken for guilt." The subtext was unmistakable. As of the 23rd of January 2026, the monarchy is no longer content to let Harry's courtroom defeats be reframed as palace conspiracies. And with the prince facing escalating legal bills, shrinking income streams, and renewed scrutiny over the commercial exposure of his children, the confrontation between Montecito and Windsor has entered a far sharper phase. This time, the institution is speaking first, and it is doing so with documents, dates, and numbers rather than emotion. In the hours following the palace's morning communiqué, senior aides provided a more detailed outline of the evidence that Princess Anne and Lady Louise say contradicts every major claim Prince Harry has advanced since losing his case against News Group newspapers, NGN. At stake is not only public perception, but the institutional integrity of the monarchy, which the royal household insists should not be subjected to broad, unsubstantiated allegations. According to royal communications sources, the dossier presented by Anne and Louise includes 4 central rebuttals to Harry's assertions. Harry has repeatedly argued that a long-standing understanding existed between the palace and media publishers, an understanding allegedly designed to limit his ability to sue earlier in exchange for access, exclusivity, and discretion. But the palace countered that no such written agreement or binding contract has ever existed. Royal legal advisers pointed out that all media access involving the royal household is regulated by standard press protocols, not contractual bargains. There is no record of any settlement term that included a prohibition on litigation, publication rights, and event access agreements involving working members of the firm, including terms shared with Hello, Getty, and other outlets, are routine in modern media relations and do not include gag orders tied to legal rights. Lady Louise specifically referenced the case of Sarah, Duchess of York, whom Harry cited as a precedent for media suppression. The palace noted that, after her divorce, Sarah published multiple memoirs and participated in televised interviews without requiring a palace waiver. She appeared in magazine spreads and press tours with Daily Mail, The Sunday Times, and OK magazine freely and publicly without evidence of restriction. Not one of these appearances was reported at the time as being approved by or tied to the royal household's legal counsel. "This is not suppression," Lady Louise told reporters. "It is a choice, and choice does not equal compulsion." The dossier also highlighted Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's own extensive commercial relationships. Beginning in the early 2020s, the Sussexes signed multiple exclusive agreements with streaming platforms and media distributors, renewed over successive years. In legal filings, portions of these contracts were voluntarily disclosed in previous proceedings, undermining the claim that the royal household blocked them from pursuing media engagements. Anne and Louise emphasized that the commercial nature of these arrangements suggests agency, not constraint, that Harry and Meghan chose these deals as part of broader media strategies rather than being coerced. Today's rebuttal also referenced a series of public remarks made by Meghan in the context of paparazzi negotiations. The Palace dossier noted, Meghan's explanation for limiting photography at high-profile events was repeatedly articulated as a commercial protection for partner brands, not as a royal-directed restriction. On social platforms and in interviews, Meghan herself framed these policies in terms of marketing strategy, not legal suppression. Those are not the words of a silenced subject, Anne's briefing team observed. They are the words of a negotiating party. Extend at 19 AMAA. Perhaps most striking in the palace's institutional rebuttal was the assertion that Harry and Meghan have at times responded to setbacks with sweeping accusations against the institution, a pattern that, royal advisers argue, the public now widely recognizes. Anne's statement this morning underscored that restraint by the Crown in previous controversies was not due to inability to respond, but due to priorities. The national calendar of duties, sensitive diplomatic travel, pressing issues from security concerns to Commonwealth engagements, and a long-standing understanding that the royal family does not engage in counter-accusation unless legal standards of evidence are met. Princess Anne reminded the press that past silence should not be misinterpreted as consent. Ours is a role of service, not spectacle. When we choose to speak, it is because truth and evidence demand clarity. Behind the scenes, aides also expressed deep concern that Harry's recent claims had overextended into areas where no factual basis exists, placing undue strain on institutional resources and distracting from scheduled royal duties. In a private briefing to senior Commonwealth representatives earlier this week, Anne said, "We serve the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. We do not serve narratives, we serve facts." These words now form the backbone of the palace's legal and public strategy, going into what royal commentators are calling a defining media moment in the Windsor legacy. The storm following Prince Harry's legal defeat and the royal family's sharp rebuttal has not subsided. Instead, it has spread across the Atlantic, through global headlines, and into the very heart of public discourse about royalty, privacy, and accountability. At the centre stands a man once labelled the People's Prince, now seen by many as a figure caught in his own narrative, estranged from a family that has grown quieter, sharper, and more unified with time. Within hours of Princess Anne and Lady Louise's formal statement, major media outlets around the world began to dissect the accusations Harry levelled and the hard truths that followed. The Times published a blunt editorial titled "The Burden of Proof Falls on the Duke." Le Monde called the palace's rebuttal measured, legalistic, and institutionally powerful. The Sydney Herald ran the headline, "When Silence Breaks, Anne Draws the Line." I thank Cruz. In the United States, where sympathy for the Sussexes has historically been stronger, outlets began to shift tone. A CNN roundtable featuring a former royal aide and a California media law expert aired just hours after the NGN verdict. Both guests agreed Harry overreached, underestimated institutional memory, and expected the palace to remain passive. The New York Times noted a shift in tone among readers and subscribers. The appetite for tales of royal victimhood has soured. There is fatigue now, and the palace's legal clarity feels refreshing in a world of noise. What surprised many was not simply that the palace responded, but who responded. Princess Anne and Lady Louise, not typically involved in high-profile press events, emerged as the dual pillars of the monarchy's counterposition. Royal historian Dr. Benedict Marsh called it a symbolic torch passing between the most respected of the old guard and the most promising of the new. It sem. Social media erupted with praise for Lady Louise, especially among younger British audiences who see in her a grounded, thoughtful counterweight to the noise from Montecito. One viral TikTok post put it plainly, "We've heard Meghan's podcast, we've read Harry's memoir. But now we're seeing the other side: quiet strength, generational clarity, and no cameras needed." The palace's calculated decision to deploy Anne and Louise has proven tactically effective. Both are viewed as non-political, low drama, steeped in duty over emotion. It was not just a rebuttal, it was a reframing of the conversation, one that emphasized heritage, proof, and institutional memory. Though Prince William has not issued a public statement, insiders confirm he was consulted throughout the drafting process of the palace's reply. Rather than stepping forward himself, William has chosen to remain in the background, letting Anne and Louise defend the crown on their own terms. Royal correspondent Helena Reeves explains, "This is William's model of leadership delegation with trust. He's letting the institution speak through those who are most respected in the roles best suited to address the moment. Is bleedexit." Behind closed doors, sources say William remains firm in his non-engagement policy, with Harry and Meghan's ongoing legal or media ventures. A close aide summarized his position. "There is no private reconciliation to offer when public damage continues. This isn't a family feud, it's institutional misalignment." While not a speaker in the current matter, Princess Catherine's symbolic role has not gone unnoticed. Her appearance, the evening of the verdict, a surprise visit to a children's hospice in London, wearing a subtle sapphire brooch from Queen Elizabeth II's collection, was described by the Daily Mail as a masterclass in compassionate deflection. Royal watchers have praised her for maintaining warmth, empathy, and public duty, without being drawn into the drama. Her quiet power serves as a stark contrast to Meghan's media-facing style. As the dust settles, two truths have emerged. The monarchy has shown that it can respond not with gossip, but with record, principle, and structure. Harry's credibility with the public, especially in the UK, has taken a significant blow. Inside the quiet hills of Montecito, California, a storm was brewing, one not made of press headlines, but of silence, blame, and desperation. Following Prince Harry's courtroom loss and the royal family's chillingly neutral but strategically devastating rebuttal led by Princess Anne and Lady Louise, the Sussex household entered a state of damage control. Not since their 2021 Oprah interview had they faced this level of scrutiny. But this time, public opinion was not leaning in their favour. And this time, the walls were closing in faster. Sources close to the Sussex camp report escalating tension behind the high hedges and guarded gates of their Riven Rock estate. Meghan, who had largely remained behind the scenes during the latest legal proceedings, was said to be furious over how the palace outmaneuvered them with dignity and cold facts. Harry underestimated the institution, one former Arkewell staffer said. He thought that legal pressure would force emotional backing from William or even Charles. But what came back was colder, sharper, and with no door left open. A senior PR consultant who had once worked on Meghan's now cancelled Spotify deal summed it up bluntly. "You don't fight monarchy with memoirs, you don't fight protocol with podcast mics." And once Anne enters the room, the public listens. While Harry was battling legal disillusionment, Meghan faced a far more urgent threat: the financial erosion of the Sussex brand. Several investors, sponsors, and media partners had begun to reconsider their involvement with Arkewell, especially after the legal fallout hinted at a lack of institutional support. A children's book publisher has reportedly paused a planned second title deal with Meghan. An eco-luxury skincare line affiliated with Meghan's lifestyle team has gone silent after delays and poor early product reception. Internal audits of Arkewell's charitable arm have revealed spending discrepancies and unusually high consulting fees, raising red flags for both the IRS and UK charitable watchdogs. To complicate matters, Arkewell's revenue model relied heavily on public goodwill and Meghan's storytelling magnetism. Both are now in flux. A leaked internal document dated the 17th of January 2026, showed a line item titled Narrative Reclamation Initiative, Q1, with an allocated $4. $2 million in projected spend across digital PR, short-form streaming content, and podcast development. One of the primary strategies, a tell-all docuseries titled Uncrowned, pitched as Meghan's raw, personal response to the coldness of the monarchy. On January 21, Meghan made her first public appearance since the legal ruling, visiting a small production studio in Santa Monica. Wearing a crisp white blazer and diamond-studded M earrings, she was photographed entering through the side entrance, accompanied by 2 media lawyers and a known Netflix showrunner. Insiders say she is preparing to film a limited-run visual podcast, combining storytelling, celebrity interviews, and a personal diary format. Meghan believes this format will allow her to reclaim the humanity the monarchy stripped from her. But critics say it's a losing game. She's playing empathy poker with the wrong deck, said UK broadcaster Simon Dunstable. Every time she speaks, Catherine appears more royal by staying silent. In contrast, Prince Harry has remained largely withdrawn. Paparazzi photos show him taking long solo walks near Montecito's Ealing's Park, dressed plainly, head down, unguarded. Sources close to former royal aides say he is struggling emotionally, especially after being privately told by both William and King Charles that no royal support, financial, legal, or symbolic, would be extended from this point forward. One insider added, "He believed Catherine might step in. He still sees her as the moral compass of the family." But even she has withdrawn. That silence hurt him more than Charles's bluntness. Tu m'as biases. What began as a family rift has now transformed into a high-stakes branding war where authenticity, trust, and longevity will decide who history favors. On one side, the ancient institution, increasingly modernized through William, Catherine, and even Anne and Louise. On the other, a global brand scrambling to rebuild its footing, guided not by crown but by clicks. While Montecito descends into uncertainty, the halls of Windsor and Buckingham Palace echo with a different kind of energy, one rooted in continuity, character, and careful preparation. The royal family, often accused of looking backward, is now focused unmistakably on the future. That future arrived quietly, but unmistakably, on the 22nd of January 2026 at St. George's Chapel, where Prince William presided over his first investiture ceremony, a historic rite passed down from sovereign to heir, marking not just the recognition of civic excellence, but the moral calibration of a modern monarchy. And this time, the investiture wasn't merely a formality, it was a statement. Clad in the deep navy regalia of the Order of the Garter, Prince William stood tall beside his father's chair, now empty as the honorees stepped forward one by one. Scientists, educators, paramedics, community leaders, each person representing a facet of Britain's enduring strength. But it was his opening speech that silenced even the most seasoned royal commentators. In an age where noise often masks virtue, we are gathered to honor the quiet heroes of our kingdom, those who build, who serve, who repair. A crown without such people is a hollow symbol. Today, we crown their character. The crowd inside St. George's, a blend of parliamentarians, Commonwealth dignitaries, and military families, responded with a standing ovation. It was William's moment, but it was also a generational inflection point. His voice carried not just authority, but conviction. Beside him, Princess Catherine drew just as much attention, not through words, but through presence. Wearing a regal white ensemble by Alexander McQueen, paired with the Strathmore Rose tiara, unseen in public for nearly 90 years, she embodied the very ideals William had articulated. Grace in service, dignity in silence, strength through constancy. At one point, as an 18-year-old youth volunteer knelt before William to receive the King's Medal of Duty, Catherine gently placed a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder. A subtle gesture, but one that lit up social media within minutes. One comment read, "No words, just action. That's our future queen." For the first time, Princess Charlotte, 10, and James, Viscount 7, 13, were seated prominently in the front row, not as children of privilege, but as observers of duty. Charlotte, in a deep burgundy coat and matching pillbox hat, sat between Catherine and Lady Louise Windsor, listening attentively and occasionally whispering questions about the ceremony. James, now visibly taller and more composed than in past years, wore a tailored grey morning suit and nodded respectfully as each honoree passed. His presence was more than ceremonial. Insiders confirm he is now being formally trained in ceremonial protocol and diplomatic conduct, preparing for greater visibility under William's reign. The symbolism was clear. A baton is being passed not through rebellion, but through reverence. The honours bestowed weren't arbitrary. William, working with Princess Anne and Privy Council advisers, had commissioned a new internal royal codex of service standards, a document outlining the 6 core virtues of modern British merit: integrity in public stewardship, innovation in national progress, courage in adversity, compassion in community, discipline in institutional duty, humility in achievement. Each honoree at the investiture represented one or more of these values. A quiet but powerful response to what the palace now internally calls the crisis of optics, referencing recent scandals involving former royals using fame without service. The monarchy cannot reward fame, it must reward fibre, Anne reportedly said in a closed briefing. This codification ensures that going forward, every title, honour or commendation from the Crown will reflect measurable service to the country, not celebrity, commercial gain, or emotion-driven campaigns. As the ceremony concluded, commentators noted the conspicuous absence of Queen Camilla. Official statements cited prior engagements, but multiple royal aides confirmed that Camilla had chosen to remain at her Raymill House estate. Paparazzi later photographed her dining at a high-end London club the same evening, surrounded by socialites and luxury PR executives. Earlier that week, she had allegedly dismissed the upcoming investiture in private as a made-for-camera procession, remarks that were leaked by a former member of her personal staff. While Charles has remained silent on the matter, insiders say the king was deeply disappointed by Camilla's dismissal of William's historic role. She doesn't see the point in honouring people she doesn't know, one palace source claimed. She sees royalty as privilege. William and Catherine see it as responsibility. As the royal family prepares for a spring Commonwealth Forum in March, where Catherine is expected to address issues of education and childhood poverty, many now see this January 2026 investiture as the moment the Crown reclaimed moral clarity. The monarchy didn't need to shout, it didn't need to fight headlines. It simply showed up, cloaked in duty and crowned in service. The January 2026 investiture did more than honour civic duty within the United Kingdom, it sent a calibrated message to the world. From Ottawa to Canberra, Delhi to Nairobi, and even across the Atlantic to Washington, D.C., the carefully orchestrated ceremony at Windsor reverberated through foreign ministries, embassies, and international media. Prince William and Princess Catherine, now the most visible faces of the monarchy, are no longer simply heirs, they are institutional stewards, diplomatic symbols, and, increasingly, cultural stabilizers in an era defined by fragmentation and digital misinformation. And as King Charles continues to scale back public engagements amid internal transitions, the royal spotlight is no longer shared, it is focused. Within hours of the investiture, the Canadian Governor-General, Adrian Dawson, issued a public statement praising the monarchy's commitment to recognizing unsung heroes and confirmed that William and Catherine would undertake a diplomatic tour of Ontario and British Columbia in June. In New Zealand, Prime Minister Tama Raukawa, often critical of colonial institutions, nevertheless praised the updated Royal Codex as a framework of modern service applicable across Commonwealth democracies. Most notably, India's President, Rajendra Gupta, invited Princess Catherine to co-chair a bilateral forum on children's education, citing her decade-long work through the Royal Foundation. This invitation, insiders say, is the first time an Indian head of state has personally requested direct royal involvement since Queen Elizabeth's 1997 visit. Diplomatic observers noted that these engagements weren't about nostalgia, they were about relevance. William and Catherine aren't selling the past, said Professor Anita Devlin of the London School of Political Diplomacy. They are reframing royalty as an ethical brand in a world of collapsing institutions. It's scarred. It's hard to overstate the quiet force Catherine has become on the global stage. Dubbed the Unity Monarch by the Vatican just 3 months earlier, Catherine's presence at the investiture, from her wardrobe choices to her silent moments with honorees, reflected what many see as her evolving diplomatic role. She does not speak often at ceremonies, but when she does, her words resonate. In a brief post-ceremony reception with the families of the awardees, Catherine reportedly said, "Today, we did not hand out medals. We witnessed the strength of our people. You didn't win this from us. You reminded us why we serve." That remark, caught on video by a charity founder's daughter, has since amassed over 42 million views across platforms. Notably, it was shared by the United Nations Youth Ambassador Network, a rare nod from a traditionally apolitical body. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace has quietly increased Catherine's foreign affairs briefings and assigned a dedicated international liaison team to her. One aide described it as preparatory scaffolding for her eventual co-reign. Camilla's refusal to attend Prince William's investiture, followed by a photographed appearance at a private soirée with art dealers and fashion consultants, triggered widespread criticism from both the press and members of Parliament. Former Culture Secretary Louise openly called her behaviour disgraceful, accusing her of prioritising clout over crown. More significantly, a leaked internal memo from the Lord Chamberlain's office suggested that Camilla may be excluded from the upcoming Commonwealth Spring Forum, with her duties under review due to incompatible public positioning. While King Charles has not commented, the silence is telling. "This is not just about bad optics," one retired palace official said. "It's about institutional coherence. Camilla represents a fading model. William and Catherine represent the restoration." As the palace moves forward, the Montecito narrative continues to unravel. With Prince Harry's defamation case collapsing and Meghan's brand partnerships under scrutiny, public and institutional patience has worn thin. Even among Commonwealth nations where their popularity once surged, such as Australia and South Africa, media coverage has turned sceptical. One Sydney headline read, "From royal rebels to irrelevant exiles." While Harry's team insists he was never given a chance to speak his truth, the prevailing sentiment is clear. He chose celebrity. William and Catherine chose service, and the world is responding accordingly. As the royal family recalibrates its public image and internal structure, 3 principles have emerged quietly echoed in royal briefings, media coverage, and ceremonial language. Service over spectacle, honours, appearances, and statements will be based on contribution, not popularity. Symbolism through stability. Royal symbols, crowns, jewels, titles are now deployed to signal institutional values, not just heritage. Family by fidelity, not just blood. With the ascendance of Lady Louise, James, and even Charlotte into public-facing roles, the new monarchy rewards alignment with duty over simple birthright. The investiture of January 2026 will be remembered not as a glitzy display, but as the moment the British monarchy redrew its own map. King Charles may still hold the throne, but the moral compass of the crown now rests with William and Catherine, and increasingly, with the generation that follows them. In a world hungry for stability, authenticity, and grace, the House of Windsor is once again becoming something rare. A symbol that listens, adapts, and endures. And in that stillness, in that simplicity of honour and humility, a quiet revolution has already begun.